Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 56th episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. It's October, which is one of my favorite months of the year. My birthday is in this month, the weather is cooling down, football's heating up, and most important, it's Halloween spooky time. You gotta watch horror and spooky stuff during the month of October, and some of my favorite spooky characters are vampires. Vampires are a fun group to explore because different universes have different rules for vampires. It's always fun to see a filmmaker spin they put on vamps. Today, I will be discussing the best vampire movies ever made to give you some Halloween flicks to add to your watch list. This is a list I feel is essential vampire watching, along with my personal feelings towards the films. I apologize if your favorite movie didn't make the cut. I've chosen 15 no honorable mentions. So let's get right into the best vampire movies ever made. Number 15, Vampire Hunter D, the series, 1985 and 2000, directed by Toyo Ishida and Yosashiki Kawaji, respectively. Vampire Hunter D follows D, a young vampire hunter who is a vampire that hates vampires as much as Blade. Based on the novels, these anime movies are some hardcore, violent vampire fun. These are for action lovers, as we see D going crazy fighting some of the enemies, and we see him take a beating himself along the way. We see some fun little love stories within, but ultimately, D is the real star here, making vampire killing seem super cool, but being a vampire looks even cooler. Number 14, Dracula, 1931, directed by Todd Browning and Carl Freund. A pioneer staple in film history, and of course, the vampire world. Dracula is the classic tale from Bram Stoker's book. This movie has been remade and redone a million times, but there is a reason for that. The black and white classic is an early example of a talkie and holds up very well to this day. Bela Lugosi set a standard of what it takes to play the Count, and although there have been many to nail it after him, he still is truly amazing to see. This movie is ahead of its time in almost every way and is a must-see for cinephiles and Dracula fans. Number 13, Blade, 1998, directed by Stephen Norrington. I went back and forth between Blade and Blade 2, but I had to go with the original. Another anti-vampire movie, Blade is a classic Marvel story of the Daywalker vampire hunter. Wesley Snipes is at the top of his game here and gives us one of his all-time performances. It's got some of the best pre-Matrix action we've ever seen and still holds up to this day. Blade is one of the most iconic and unique action characters in recent history. This one maybe is one you had to grow up with, but if you grew up with it, I'm sure it's a staple on your vampire list. Number 12, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 1992, directed by Fran Rubel Kuzui. Buffy is a film that most critics will tell you is trash. In fact, writer Joss Whedon created a whole TV show to correct the failures of this movie. It didn't make much money and was critically panned, but just like with all things, time can shed some new light on things. Over the years, this movie has gained cult status and is considered one of the best vampire and high school movies. Chrissy Swanson gives us a great performance here as we have another anti-vampire movie on this list. This is a fun, goofy, and silly horror comedy with a slew of young stars before they were famous, including Hilary Swank, Ben Affleck, and David Arquette. You even get a fun veteran performance from Donald Sutherland. This may be a wacky entry for a list that will more or less be considered reasonable by most. But if you're just looking for a fun time to kill 85 minutes, this isn't a bad way. Number 11, Ganja and Hess, 1973, directed by Bill Gunn. This is one of the most unique vampire movies I've ever watched. It's a blaxploitation vampire film with some very interesting lore on vampires. This film doesn't play by the rules at all of what we traditionally know about vampires and how they operate. This is an interesting love story with a very unique style of its own. Even though there have been many versions of this movie recut and re-released, the 2-hour cut is the one you want. I must say, for an early 70s film made on a shoestring budget by a lot of inexperienced people, this movie came out incredible. It's another one that has been critically reassessed and is now seen in a great light. This would be a bit more art house and maybe one for the deep cinephiles, but if you want to try something different, this may just be your flavor. Number 10, Near Dark, 1987, directed by Catherine Bigelow. Near Dark, coming from legendary Catherine Bigelow, you can see the James Cameron influence on this film from the cast and the setting and action style, but she made this her own and really created a style for herself you'd see carved out in the early 90s. Near Dark is an action western where a young man meets a woman, has a date with her, and gets turned into a vampire by her. After that, complete chaos ensues, and I mean that in the best way possible. This rare cult classic is one of the best 80s and action movies you've never seen. If you like vampires and 80s movies, this is your dream come true. We get one of Bill Paxton's best early performances playing a badass 80s punk rock country vampire freak. This is a must watch. I adore this film very much. Number 9, The Lost Boys, 1987, directed by Joel Schumacher. I know people maybe would expect this to be in the top 5, but we got some good ones left. The Lost Boys at this point, I don't even think can be called a cult movie because of how big it's gotten over the years. The Lost Boys follows a guy who moves to a new town and ends up falling for a girl who runs with a gang of vampires and gets turned into one himself. Known for its horror goth style, music, and of course the Corys, The Lost Boys is a staple in 80s cinema and holds up better than 90% of 80s movies. It's super fun, got some great action, and has a Peter Pan wonder to it that makes adults feel like kids again. This movie has been parodied and appreciated through pop culture for decades now. Number 8, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, 2014, directed by Anna Lily Amirpour. We got our first foreign language entry, and it isn't the last. This Persian language film is one of the most beautiful vampire stories I've ever watched. A black and white film with not a lot of speaking, grand sets, and minimal characters. Its magic lies in our wonderful lead, played by Sheila Van. This film follows a mysterious young vampire girl who wanders the streets of the fictional ghost town called Bad City as she meets people and shares interactions along the way that ultimately lead to a rewarding one. She rolls through on a skateboard, wears a cape, and likes 80s music. That's all we know of her. We don't even know her name, but we don't need to. This is a beautiful story that personally resonated with me. The loose nature of this film leaves lots for fun and imagination. Number 7, Let the Right One In, 2008, directed by Thomas Alfredson. Based on the novel of the same name, another foreign language film on this list, and one I think most people would really love. This Swedish story, like our last entry, is such a beautiful one. This movie follows a young boy who meets a young vampire girl, and they form a very interesting loving relationship. One of the best puppy love movies along with vampire movies, this movie was shocking to myself that it didn't make the top 5. The two child actors in this film are astonishing and really carry this thing from start to finish. A slow burning and very rewarding film. This is an every Halloween staple for me, as the ending is still one of my favorite endings of any vampire film. This movie was remade in an American version called Let Me In and a TV show of the same title, which tells you alone this one had some steam to it. Number 6, From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996, directed by Bobby Rodriguez. Okay, this movie being placed here may be the most biased placement on the list. I think most would agree I maybe have this too high at 6, but come on. This is one of the most fun and unique movies of the 90s. Penned by the great Quentin Tarantino, this movie follows a pair of brothers played by the legend George Clooney and QT himself as they try and get to the Mexican border after performing a series of heists. Now, this one is a strange one for the list because it almost feels like two different movies. The beginning feels like a QT style crime movie, then shifts to this vampire slaying Robert Rodriguez style movie. A tense and gritty first half with a fun and stylized horror fest in the second. From Dusk Till Dawn has far too much to love about it to ever exclude it when talking about best vampire movies. Out of every movie on this list, I've probably seen this one the most. This gives us an early badass performance from Clooney that's one of his best roles and one of the most memorable Selma Hayek moments in history. This movie also sparked a whole bunch of sequels and spinoffs. Number 5. Interview with a Vampire, 1994, directed by Neil Jordan. Oh, good old Lestat and Louis. Starting off the top 5 with a defining 90s movie as well as a classic vampire story with two of Hollywood's biggest stars as the leads. Brad and Tom in this movie have chemistry that's undeniable, although they seem to not like working together on the picture. But that's neither here nor there. This story follows a slave owner turned vampire who ends up doing an interview with Christian Slater, recounting his life as a vampire, going over the horror and glamours of the life. This film is beautiful and elegant as it explores many of the best themes of vampire lore. Love, loneliness, moral implications, and the struggles of being a vampire whilst possessing human emotions. This movie, gorgeous, with beautiful set pieces, elaborate costumes, and great cinematography, along with a beautiful script. We must highlight the best performance in the film comes from child Kirsten Dunst, who is, in my opinion, one of the best and most underrated actresses of her time. This film is great at tackling every angle of being a vampire, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This movie has just been made into a TV show as well. Number 4. What We Do in the Shadows, 2014, directed by Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clemens. Honestly, one of the best mockumentaries of all time and one of the funniest. This movie is a gut busting fun take on vampires doing regular stuff, living their everyday lives. This movie follows four vampires who are flatmates in New Zealand, and we see just how crazy these dudes are doing and saying some of the funniest stuff. There are scenes in this movie that literally made me cry. They are so funny. Everyone I know who's seen this movie loves it, and it gives you a different perspective on vampires and the lore. This movie makes being a vampire look super fun and cool, although these guys are idiots. This is some of the slickest writing, and the details of each character gives them all a unique edge that blends us up something great for fans of vampires. This movie has spawned one of the best and funniest shows based from the film that we have ever got. So much so that it rivals this movie in comparison. But this kickstarted all of that, and it deserves its respect for it. Rest in peace, Peter. Number 3. Thirst, 2009, directed by the legendary Park Chan-wook. Arguably the best director coming out of South Korea, Park Chan-wook always comes with the style, great story, and a polarizing feast for the eyes. This movie is one of his most underrated and finest examples of that. Third stars one of the best actors of this century, Song Kang-ho, and he is a moral man who ends up becoming a vampire through infection. He ends up changing everything he knows about his life because of this. He meets a young woman who becomes enamored with him, and together they embark on a love story for the ages. What I love about this film is Park stuck to the typical lore but put his own spin on it. The way he showed their strengths and weaknesses was unique and unlike most other vampire films. The color play and cinematography in this movie are some of the best, and the ending is just absolutely perfect. Number 2. Only Lovers Left Alive, 2013, directed by Jim Jarmusch. Okay, another one that may be considered a little too high, but this is absolutely where my bias comes in. Only Lovers Left Alive is my favorite vampire movie. It stars legendary Tilda Swinton and Loki himself, Tom Hiddleston, as two vampires who are in love and live in totally different parts of the world. Although they don't see each other every day, they are very much in love and would do anything for each other. One of them must go and be by the other side as they battle depression and loneliness. This movie's plot is extremely thin. This movie is honestly a slice of life vampire film that just shows us the current state of being a vampire. This movie has Jarmusch's style all over it, with amazing music, great direction, and some great performances from every character involved. Only Lovers is a trance-like film that puts you in a state and leaves you there until it's over, and afterward, it kind of forces you to think of how you live your life as a vampire, how you go about your love life, and makes you reflect on the world and the creatures who inhabit it. Only Lovers Left Alive is a brilliant, beautifully created work that I love very, very much. It's near and dear to my heart, and I wouldn't change one frame of this film. Guys, last but absolutely not least, our number one pick, Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. So, my top pick I felt had to be a film that encompasses everything about being a vampire. A film that's been undeniable since its release and one that has stood the test of time. That movie is Francis Ford's Dracula. Another based off the novel, this movie took everything wrong with most Dracula adaptations and got them correct. It stars Gary Oldman as the Count, and my lord, what a performance for the ages. He is one of the best actors of all time, and he shows it here. We also get a great performance from a young Winona Ryder as Mina, and a legendary performance from Anthony Hopps as Van Helsing. The score, set pieces, and horror elements make this horror goth classic for the ages. Francis doesn't get enough credit for this film. It perfectly captures the essence of Dracula, the mysterious, alluring, sexy figure in a gorgeous style that feels almost fantasy and mythical like. A very sexually charged and darkly erotic movie. Bram Stoker's Dracula perfectly embodies everything a vampire movie should have, and a great one to start off your vampire movie journey with. I know Keanu's performance has aged very poorly. What was Francis thinking, having this newcomer act with these heavyweights? Despite any of that, Dracula is one everyone should see and should be at the top of your Halloween watch list. Guys, thank you so much for watching my best vampire movies ever made. Let me know your favorite vampire movies below. What ones did I miss? Let me know if there's a film or topic you want me to go over or review. Guys, I got a podcast with my buddy, The Cutting Room Floor. I'll link that below if you're interested in more movie content. Follow me on Letterboxd, Ralph Vader. I'll also link that below. If you made it this far, go ahead and like and subscribe for me. Help me out, guys. I appreciate that a lot. It's free of charge. I will be back next week. And don't forget the popcorn.